My name is Bill Wallace, 5076 Momenti. It seems like we need to have some kind of an outline of which is the best way to go at this point, because you mentioned the Howard Hughes. When does that come up? I mean, if they can veto the whole thing, how does that happen? If we save ourselves a hell of a lot of money if we don't have to go through these other routes. And you didn't explain that very well. And I have one other question that I was going to ask also. That it seems to me, and I've been talking to a number of people in the hot tub anyway, that the subsidy that he's asking for, you know, if it could be locked in, and we've just been told now it probably can't, but it seems like that, based on the other things that you've said about our CCNRs and their ability to just impose houses on us, sounds pretty grim to me. That if we can negotiate with him to come up with his subsidy would be a godsend if it could be locked in, obviously. And I wondered if you even started negotiating on that kind of thing before we find out, basically, if Howard Hughes can block this whole thing, and what is the possibility of that? Has it ever been done before? And that seems that we need more information for that.
Yeah, I'll take that. The first part is the process from the private side that I mentioned. There is no public hearings on this whatsoever. It is no different than any of these properties that get developed in Summerlin itself. They go through an administrative review committee, and that administrative review committee is a part of whom I believe Howard Hughes would appoint to the Summerlin Council or to the design review committee. But whomever that is, it's a private matter that goes through the process as they're going through buying the property. Howard Hughes makes that determination. So that can happen tomorrow, that can happen 6 months from now, but that does not mean that they can come out and develop right immediately thereafter, because the second part of that equation is they got to go through the public hearing process, which is the government itself. So those are two separate matters that you're going to be dealing with. But again, there is no specific timings, and I apologize. The reason why I didn't give you any timeline on that, because it could happen tomorrow, and then once they submit the plans, and there's a review process that's set in place. And again, that is for any development that you see, the Discovery across the street that is going on right now. They had to get Summerlin's approval for what is being approved there. The second part of your question on the assessments, I want to clarify, you mentioned about not being locked in. The one thing that I mentioned is I don't know what those assessment numbers are. Even if you agreed if it's a $10 more or $5 more, $15 more, the point that I want to make to counsel you is there's no guarantee that that deed restriction is going to be in place for a year to 5 years without somebody coming back. To come back to the table and say, hey, I need another $20 more assessment on top. So that's what I need to advise you. I'm not telling you that's not in the best interest per se, but as a business decision, you have to figure out that risk versus reward if you're willing to put that much money out there for the risk of somebody coming back to say, hey, I made a mistake, I need another $5 more on top of the assessment. So it's my job to bring that up to you as a concern. Although I'm not saying that you should not do this, but those are concerns that you're going to run into.
Gail Leibovitz, 10493 Sroto Lane. My question is fairly simple, but I'm concerned. Have any golf courses who have been zoned for both the R and the C levels ever won and not have development occur?
Good question.
In the Las Vegas
Good
Valley,
question.
obviously.
How about that?
I'll take that. Not that I know of, for the most part. I'm trying to think of, I don't know, it was Legacy, there's Lake Las Vegas, and I know those golf courses ended up working deals out with some of the residents or the HOAs, and again, it was based on working something out to get residential out there. I don't think it was Legacy, I think it was Stallion Mountain, maybe. I think that was the one, Pulte development out there.
Les Astra, 10479 Riva de Fiore. What I'd like to know is, besides building houses, could he build amenities like swimming pools, tennis courts, pickleball courts, community center, fitness center?
The reason why I'm smiling is because I'm on the other side of the coin on this, and I can tell you, you can negotiate free land, more open space and park space to be owned by you. You can negotiate pools. I can tell you, and I know from talking to some people up at Silverstone, they wanted the developer to come in and redo the clubhouse, redo things. And that's kind of, actually, it's a very good point to bring up, because that's the other part. One of my partners told me earlier today, they go, instead of the developer spending $2.5 million to defend the lawsuit, that money could have been put back into the community itself. So those are little things actually little things that are big things, of things that you can ask for. So it's not just a one-sided conversation. Those are amenities that I already have a list of myself of things you need to check off to get, because hey, this is two sides of the negotiation. This isn't going to be one-sided, okay? And the good news is, as I said, we can give that information knowing from the development side of typically what is on the table.
Mr. Granauer, back here, in the back.
Okay.
You can't miss me.
Hey, I got new contacts the other day, and the whole room's bright right now. I need new ones again, so they just gave me a bad prescription, I guess. So I can't see.
My name is Harvey Rubenstein, 10248. Harvey Rubenstein, 10248 Cuesta Serra Court. Back in October, everyone sitting at that board up front and the management heard me ask Mr. Michael Schulman, who was our HOA attorney, I don't know if he still is or not, the simple question, can we give any money from our assessments to another property? His answer emphatically was, no, just a small amount, not a large amount. What I'm hearing is that you're saying there's probably a vehicle for that to be done. So that's my first question. My second question is, the maintenance yard for the golf courses on this side of the community, and they use small vehicles to go to the fairways. Can we, if this becomes a mixed-use development, can we then declare trespass of larger vehicles to maintain the property in the future?
Okay, I'll tackle both those questions. The first one is, if your HOA attorney told you could do minimum, then that's what you can do, okay? I was answering one of the questions of an assessment. I don't know what that assessment number is. You've delved down into the weeds a little bit more. If your HOA attorney has told you can only do very little or whatever, then that's your answer, okay? I'm not disputing what he's saying, okay? So I want to make sure I make that clear. Number two, with respect to the maintenance vehicles or vehicles going, today there is a maintenance access agreement, as I already mentioned, between the HOA and the golf course. That would be something that you could renegotiate to be a little bit more clearer with respect to the concerns of the type of vehicles that are being used on the golf course. But I would believe, and we'd have to go and check what type of access and vehicles are allowed or not allowed in the agreement. I don't have that in front of me.
Back here. We'll get to you, sir. We'll get to you.
Okay, Sharon Murphy, 10441 Aclamado. First of all, I want to thank Commissioner Brager and for your deep understanding and involvement and desire to learn what the community wants. I can't speak for the whole community. I can probably only speak for myself, but personally, I strongly want to see this golf course preserved and our land values, our property values maintained. Thank you. And pursuant to the other point that you made about how, the longer this becomes, if you can resolve this quickly, it won't have a negative impact. I would like to see this resolved quickly, and I would certainly not like to see millions of dollars spent in litigation. So, that's my view. But we also have, for your information, been conducting a survey, and I don't know what the most recent results of the survey are, but I would very much be interested for this survey result to be made public soon.
Hi, my name is Nancy Minell, and I live at 10242 Andante Court. My question is, we're talking about, we've been hearing numbers, he wants 300,000 or whatever, but is that on paper? Has he given us, because I can tell you, we came out of a 4-year lawsuit, and I have papers, we killed a lot of trees. And I want to know, has he written anything? Has his lawyers given you anything that we can work off of? Because you talk about negotiation. We still have to get that paper first before we can even make any kind of decision to see what he is asking for. So have we gotten that?
Yeah, my understanding, and again, I have not spoken to the property owner or any representatives, my understanding is that there hasn't been anything in writing as of yet. There's just been verbal conversation. So again, this is part of the beginning of this whole process, because obviously things need to be in writing and you need to document what needs to get done. That will happen as the process goes. As I said, this board here has been very proactive in trying to get everything out and all the information as you're going down another parallel course and trying to get communications with the property owner. So that will happen essentially.
This is going to be addressed. I'm Tony Borski. I'm at 10669 Angelo today. This is the commissioner. I think you give us an ambiguous answer about the land values, because I think there's precedent set on what happened at Badlands, at least what I read in the paper, and maybe the paper was wrong, is that the county or the city has reassessed their properties at a 20% discount off the tax base. And if that's so, then what do we expect here? Do we expect a 20 to 25% decrease in the value of our homes?
I don't see how the city could do that at this time. So newspapers, I've read things about me that I thought they were in a different room than I was. So I think we have to get facts on that, and I'm happy to ask that and get that to your members up here. But nothing's happened there yet. Nothing's been finished. They can't just assess you 20% on what? Where are they getting the number? No one, that hasn't happened at this point in time. And they normally don't assess until someone either sells their home or something has changed there. So I've not seen that happen as yet. So I don't think I'm giving you ambiguous answers. I think right now that their 2-year ordeal hurt them more than solving the issue. And so that's what's happened. And they're a different community than you are, and that also makes a difference. So you have a lot of value in here still, and I'm certain there's other real estate agents in here, and we all agree to disagree sometimes, but I sit on the side where I watch what builders do, how they develop, what could happen in here, and I think that right now I'm giving you some honest facts.
Okay, my question for you is, we're a different community than any one that you've talked about, in that we're a private community, we're a HOA that has limited access, we have a garden community, you're talking about Silverstone, which is wide open with several associations, and you're talking about Badlands. Okay, you're talking about Badlands having, it's not a unified community over there, it's quite diverse in the Queensbridge. Now, does that change where we are because we are a gated community? Does that mean that if they decide to build, will they have access to all of our streets? Will the people who move in on the golf course who are not members of the HOA, will they be able to use our streets? Will they be able to use our security force?
So the first thing I'll do is, there's about 3 questions that you had in there. The first thing is, no golf course community is the same. So I apologize. What I wanted to do is, in going through my analysis, is point out some of the similarities in the golf courses that we see that when we did our research here to prepare for tonight and give the advice, is there are some similarities that I'm obligated to tell you that, hey, this community and these communities, they're similar in this issue, and this is how that issue has been resolved, okay? So I don't want you to think that he's right. No one community is the same, okay? The second issue that becomes an issue, and this is a part of the process that I can't answer, but I can answer if we did sit down at the table and have these discussions, is What is the ingress, egress? What is the traffic impact? You know, you got a lot of these things, and you brought up some good points that we got to address. There's a part of the golf course here that does not have any access whatsoever, and it's just surrounded by homes. So there are issues that would have to be discussed that we don't have answers today, but those are things that we already have written down, that there's a laundry list of questions that you've mentioned that are a part of that already that we need to get answers to.
David Pierce, 5139 Pensier. He asked part of the question I had, but there's more to that. Okay, our golf course meanders through the entire complex. So it's surrounded by Sienna. But that land is private. So when it's developed, how much control is the Sienna community going to be able to control over that and make sure they follow our CCRs and the 55 plus restrictions, everything that we currently have?
And those are great points. I'm sorry if I didn't answer the rest of that question. Is that's a part of what Commissioner Breger mentioned when you're looking at conditions and you're trying to sit across the table from somebody. Of course you want an age-restricted community. If anything gets built, you want to make sure, I would believe, as be a part of the homeowners of the association itself, to fit in the community itself. So the questions that you have are the issues that need to be discussed if anything's going to be done to the golf course, because the concern is those access, the gates, the HOA issues, and so on. So those are things today we don't have answers for, but down the road, if you get down the road in that path, those answers, you'll have those answers.
I don't think it's a question. I think they have demanded. They can't just move in and start putting high-rises.
No. So let me clarify. There's no way that tomorrow you're going to see high-rises go without you being notified and anybody knowing what's going on. As I mentioned earlier, and I apologize if I wasn't clear, there's a long process for development if development is going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight.
I live on Riva di Romanza Street. I have a question for you. In the Badlands situation, I lived over in Queensbridge. They never offered to sell us view lots. They never offered any premium on any of the lots. Everything was the price as is, and we lived there. Here, it's a different situation. Do we have any recourse against Sun Colony? Because the implied representation, forget anything else, was that we were going to be on a golf course and play a premium for the...
I'll answer. I believe what I heard is there any liability, Sun Colony, on them selling view lots when there may not be view lots? That is a question that could cut both sides, because obviously you paid for a view, there was an expectation there. You do have a legal issue with that, and I would, if I was a homeowner and I paid for that. The other side of that is when you purchase, you got to look in your CC&R documents, understand that use of the golf course may not be a use there for forever. So there's both, but to answer, there's two sides of a position there with respect to litigation, and I'd have to talk to litigation counsel on that to figure out what your chances are for success on that is.
Lynn Michaels, Riva d'Angelo. I have a question for our attorney and for Susan. They're probably, hopefully, quick questions or quick answers. Number one for you, Mr. Grunauer.
Just call me Bob. That's it. Bob's easy. Okay, Bob.
I can't read it this far away. Howard Hughes Corporation. Would it be a likely scenario that if it was Pulte or whatever company that might want to purchase the land, that goes to the Howard Hughes Corporation and says, if you approve us, we will give you, they're deep pockets and we're not. So there might be more advantage, or was that a scenario that would happen where they basically get a deal to the Howard Hughes Corporation in order to sell it, so that they would give them their approval. And then the question for our commissioner is, as I believe it, you're going to be termed out in a couple of years, is that correct? So if this isn't resolved, then we have to find out who gets elected and whether they're on our side or not. So, you know.
That would be good questions for them.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is Howard Hughes, it obviously is a big corporation. They got to go through a bureaucracy to get what is approved and what's not. To me, the way I look at it is, on black and white on paper, in hindsight now. In hindsight, now that I've seen what's going on with golf courses, that property being zoned R2 is the problem. And so legally, if I'm counsel over there at Howard Hughes, there's an expectation, even though there's a golf course, property zone residential. If it was zoned something else, you have a better argument. So it makes it a little bit tough. I'm not going to say that Howard Hughes is definitely will say no to development, but it makes it a little bit more difficult going through that process. And it depends. Look, to me, Summerlin is the nicest community, Sienna and all this that's out here in the entire nation. And it's a beautiful place here. So I know they're very critical with development if development's coming in. It's tough to develop in Summerlin. I know that much.
Will they be likely to approve it more likely than not? And here you.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have those discussions, but I can tell you the issue that I'm telling you, and I'm giving you a black and white issue here, is property zoned R2. There's a residential component that's allowed. There's a golf course today that's existing. That's a determination that they got to make as they go through that process.
Yeah, hi, John Rana, 4239 Fiorabella. I'm a builder developer, and I've been through this process multiple times. Hearsay from the golf course is that they can build on 1, 17, 18, 10, and the driving range. And the reason they can, probably because of the access through their main gates or their parking lot. Now, they'd have to put 30-foot road, wide roads, each way with 60-foot, including curb, sidewalk, and gutter, and pass the fire test, which is the fire department, for emergency access. Going through the other properties, the other access we have, 6 to 9, and these are access that someone brought up, they would have to rip up our sidewalks, curbs, gutters, and make another 60-foot wide road in a cul-de-sac turnaround in every fairway. They'd also have to put lift stations on 2, 10, maybe even 8. Lift stations run between 2 to 3 million. They start at that and they end up at 10 million. And a lift station is to pull the sewer out. Gray water, get up, get to the grade, and take it out. The economical feasibility for them to do that is almost impossible. Now, my suggestion is this, and we can go on forever with attorneys and costs. I would suggest to the board that even though in deed restrictions, if there's a BK, a bankruptcy, those can be lifted by the bankruptcy court. However, if we have a window of 1 to 2 or 3 years, and he's willing to run the golf course, then make a deal with him. If in fact the number that you can get from him is 300, and that's real, then we would come back with some counter, and this is a formal question, I'm sorry. And we would come back with a counter stating that we will pay our $300,000 in landscape maintenance if it's hired by Jermello or another contract. And we would maintain the lakes over here. We would maintain between 6 and 7 to the butts, anything of our property. So we would be paying of that 300 to beautify what we already have, not giving him point blank money to do what he wants to. And we put this deal to bed. Anyway, it's just going to be cost prohibitive for him to come in, or anybody to come in through our access to fight us in court, which we don't want to do because it's just wasted money and time. And this, even though it won't give us future value 10 years from now, It will give us immediate relief, and then with the negotiations, you're gonna find out if it's for real. Or is he trying to get 300 this year, or 500 next year, and 800 the year after?
Your question is well stated, and the answer to that is a question that's gonna, I would presume, go out to the community to make that vote and make that determination. But everything that you stated, I agree with you as you analyze the pros and the cons on development like this. I understand where you're coming from, and I think the answer is the community has to make that decision at the end of the day.
Sherelle, 75210 Volby Street. Kind of a two-fold question. Oh, okay, can't hear me? I feel like I'm super loud to myself. One issue, all the golf courses that you are referring to aren't in Summerlin, so does that make a difference in any way as to when you approach these individuals regarding a 55 and older community, such as Sienna? A lot of courses are also, well, like Red Rock and all those are privately owned, one of them at least, they're privately owned ones. You can't hear me? Oh, okay, okay.
What's your second question?
My second question is, in regards to the assessments that everybody is talking about, what I'm hearing you say, it doesn't matter. We could be throwing out 300,000 plus minus the year, whatever he wants, and he can still turn around and probably is in negotiations with other developers at this time, or talking with them anyway. And any money we throw out is just throwing it away, giving it to him to line his pocket, that he's just gonna leave the golf course as is, continue running it as is. Where's that money going? In his pocket, or is it going to maintenance? Is it going to beautify the community? All these issues before we start throwing money that way as well. It's going to cost us money one way or another versus attorneys or builders or such.
So I'll start with the first question is with respect to golf courses outside of Summerlin. And again, I'm working today currently on the Las Vegas Country Club on developing that, working with the country club members itself. So each community is different, okay? Even if it's in Summerlin or if it's outside of Summerlin, each of them though have a similar issue. They have a golf course and they have a specific zoning on the property itself. They have certain documents that are recorded against the property. Some do, some don't. So based on those facts, you run with what you can and cannot do with development. So it doesn't matter if it's in Summerlin or if it's in Anthem or if it's somewhere in Henderson or somewhere in the city of Las Vegas. The fact of the matter is these golf courses all have a specific zoning. They all have specific recorded documents against the property itself that says what you can and can't do. And then based on that, that's where you run and figure out how do you resolve that issue. The second part of the question is, and please understand, is if the assessment issue itself, and I respect this and we've talked about it, it's a business decision, okay? I'm not telling you not to do it. Look, I'm one of the very few attorneys, and I kind of laugh as I say this, is I don't want you to go and spend hundreds and millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. That's not the way to go, okay? The way to go about this, from everybody's benefit on both sides of the table, is to sit down and figure out what's best. I can't tell you what's best until you sit at the negotiation table, and I told these guys on a call last week, I said, you know what, until I can see or talk to that property owner and start getting a feel what they want, what they don't want, and get that feel, that's when you come back with the deal points to see what that is. And then you can make a more informed decision on the assessment. So please understand, although I told you some of the negatives on the assessment, if the community itself votes on that issue, then that's what you do, understanding the pros and the cons. Because no matter what decision you're going to make in the upcoming months, there's pros and cons to each of those issues, okay? And it's up to people like me or someone else to give you guys what those pros and cons are, because you need to be fully informed regardless of the decision you make, okay? And no decision is going to be unanimous, but the most important thing is if I'm going to be involved through the whole process, you need to be informed to make that decision.
Arlene Rubenstein, 10248 Cuesta Serra Court. I agree totally with John Renner, if we have to do anything. However, I am slightly disappointed that you haven't conferred with our HOA attorney, whose advice was that we cannot give any money from our assessment to subsidize the golf course. Also, there's a safety issue. We have homes along the golf course where we have people who don't live in Siena constantly in the backyards of people whose homes abut the golf course. Now, what happens if Dr. Lee decides to build houses there, and these people have no interest in Siena? What happens then? And you say that they could become part of Siena. I doubt it. Our HOA was founded with very strict CC&Rs. It was approved for 2,001 homes, not 3,001 homes, not 2,501 homes. How does that issue get addressed?
Okay, I'll go through number one again. I apologize for not talking to the HOA attorney. I'm not going to make any type of representations. If your HOA attorney told you can do something, you can do it, so be it. I'm here on the zoning and land use. I was talking about the hypothetical on any type of assessments, and I can confer with him to confirm if that's off the table, it's off the table. So I don't control that from the legal side or understand that with respect to his expertise. The second part of your question, I lost the second part of your question. I apologize. Oh, security. Again, these are hypotheticals that were thrown out there, okay? There's nothing that's going to happen tomorrow, okay? The concern is the person who bought against the golf course there, security, it's not the same community. Those are issues that this community here will have to decide what, if anything's going to happen. Again, these are great issues that are being raised because these are issues that need to be discussed. Again, there's been no conversations whatsoever with respect to a community and what needs to be done. But those are issues that will be discussed when and if that time comes.
You didn't answer the last of her question. She asked about the amount of homes that were allowed when this was built in the area.
Yeah, and so earlier what I mentioned is there is a development plan for the village itself. There's a certain number of homes that are in that density cap or the homes that are allowed in the village. I forget what exactly this village is when this village was coming in to be built. If anything, some of the things that you need to check into, which is valid, which is what we do when we deal with issues like this, is there's a traffic study that was probably approved for this community for a certain amount of homes. Now, if you add additional homes, does that put too much stress on the road network itself? So those are things that you need to look into. As far as a density cap, I looked into this. When this project was approved years ago, there was a mention of the number was 2,150. Yeah, 2,150 was the number that was proposed. But what happens is on